1, 2, 3, 4.
Screen time, screen time, screen time, screen time.
It's my screen time too.
Screen time.
Hello, and welcome to It's My Screen Time Too, the podcast where we review the programming the other critics ignore, stuff made for kids. Find out what to watch for family movie night, what to avoid altogether, and what you'll want to watch alone voluntarily. I'm Deborah.
And I'm Katie.
And I have 3 kids who are 15, 11, and 11.
And I have 2 kids who are 9 and 6. Today, we are reviewing Wicked, the biggest blockbuster release of the Thanksgiving pre-Christmas season. And we are reviewing it because, listeners, you may remember that we both happen to love musicals, and this was, without a doubt, the splashiest holiday release on our calendars. Short description of the movie. It was theatrically released in the U.S. on November 22nd, 2024, so we're a little bit on the late side, but not too bad for avoiding the immediate post-holiday theater rush. It was produced by Universal Pictures, comes in at 2 hours and 40 minutes long, so quite long for a movie that we're seeing with our children, or at least my children. Mm-hmm. It's rated PG. It's based on a stage musical by Stephen Schwartz that opened in 2003 and is still going strong on Broadway, which was itself based on a 1995 book by Gregory Maguire. That novel was a retelling of the 1900 novel by Frank L. Baum, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and its subsequent 1939 film adaptation. So that's a lot of different zigzaggy roads. But this movie, Wicked, was directed by John M. Chu, who you might know from Crazy Rich Asians or In the Heights, with a screenplay by Winnie Holtzman and Dana Fox. Short plot summary, according to IMDb: Elpheba, a misunderstood young woman because of her green skin, and Glinda, a popular girl, become friends at Shiz University in the land of Oz. After an encounter with the wonderful Wizard of Oz, their friendship reaches a crossroads. Did you like it?
I did like it. How about you?
Me too. I don't think it'll go down as one of my all-time favorite movie musicals, but it's one I'm happy to have in the canon.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for so much hype, sometimes things don't live up to your expectations, but this lived up to mine.
I agree. All right, let's just do a quick catch-up on our history with the franchise. So had you seen the musical before this?
No, and I haven't read the book.
Wow. So were you at all familiar with the plot, or was it all new?
It was all new, except I recognized a couple of songs.
Right.
That are just kind of in the zeitgeist, like popular, and then that one at the end.
Defying Gravity.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about you? Are you a Wicked head?
I have seen Wicked on stage twice, and like I said, it's not a super favorite of mine, but I like it just fine. And I had never read the book. And further, I have never read The Wizard of Oz. I never read Frank L. Baum's book. Because there's like a large series of Oz books that were still going strong in my childhood. I think one or both of my older sisters read and loved a lot of the Oz books, but I never did. Did you read any of those oldies?
No, I mean, the movie factored heavily into my childhood, but then we've talked on this podcast before about the spooky Return from Oz television movie, and that turned me off of Oz. It was just too scary for me.
It was
as
scary.
A kid. Yeah, super scary. So I never read the books.
How about your kids? Did you watch Wizard of Oz with them? Are they familiar with that?
Yes, they've seen it. All of them have seen it at least once, probably a couple times, but it's been a long time. It's been years since we've watched it.
It really has. I've watched it with both boys at one point or another, but it's been long enough that I'm fairly confident Kenny has no memory of it, and Jay is only hazy. Mm-hmm. Why do you think this isn't for grown-ups? what was hard for us to connect to because it wasn't necessarily made for us? This is a tricky question here because it was truly made to be a movie for everyone, perhaps maybe even more so for the grown-ups than the kids. But let's just see. Do you have anything for why this isn't for grown-ups?
The length. It's so long, which because we're grown-ups taking kids to it, that just kind of adds like a layer of anxiety about it because you're like, are my kids gonna make it through? Am I gonna make it through? And we went on Thanksgiving evening and the theater was pretty full, and there were clearly some families there with kids who were like too little or just not ready to be out late. I mean, it started at 6, but for a little kid who's had a family holiday all day, that's like a long day. So,
yeah, and it's a long movie. So if it started at 6, you have a half an hour of previews plus 2 hours and 40 minutes of movie. That doesn't put you out of the theater till 9.
so that would be my main complaint. But at the same time, like, what would you cut? We talked about this as a family, and I don't know what you would cut from this. It was spectacular.
I don't know that I would agree with you in the what would you cut. I felt like there were some scenes that they were trying to like visually represent burgeoning relationships between characters, and that so they wanted to give them like quiet moments together that to me seemed to drag or maybe weren't the most efficient way to communicate that. But all right, I'm with you. I think that's probably the best answer in terms of why this wouldn't be for grown-ups is just more actually about the anxiety of seeing it in the theaters with your kids.
Yeah, I guess if for parents who are like, should I go? Should I not go? I would say if you're taking younger kids, just go like when the previews are going to be over. If you can buy your seat ahead of time, just slip into the theater at the end of the previews. And I like love previews. That's why I want to go to the movies. But that would shave some time off, or just wait for it to be streaming and then you can watch it in like 2 nights.
And also, I've been doing major side eye for years now at the families that come armed to the movie theater with like full on fleece blankets and pillows. I'm like, what do they think is happening here that they need like this many accoutrements at the movie theater? But we actually did bring fleece blankets this time around to like make the experience a little bit cozier and kind of cement in their brains, this is something you're in for the long haul, you know? And I think that was effective too. I think a slightly easier question might be, why is this movie for grown-ups? What was there for us to grab onto, even if the property wasn't necessarily explicitly only made for us?
I mean, it's a more sophisticated take on the Land of Oz, right? And if you're a theater kid type of grown up, you have been waiting like your whole life to see this. Because I know some people are like super into Wicked. And it's just like fun to revisit a property. I think that factored more heavily in our childhoods because there was just like less to watch, and there were just more like The Wizard of Oz. This is the one kids movie on TV. So it's fun to get like a new perspective.
Yeah, I think when I think of the major like plot strands of Wicked, you have the one that is like the misfit learning to embrace her power, and the story of the misfit finding their way is like a very common plot strand in children's media. So like that's something maybe the younger kids could latch onto. But then there are other major themes, like there's a significant romance plot thread, and there's a significant kind of the perils and pitfalls of female friendships plot thread, and then there's a whole political plot thread, and these are, I think, really things that kids might find less interesting, but that could make it more interesting than your average like, oh, this little girl is different, how is she going to find her way sort of plot for grown-ups.
Totally.
I, for one, specifically wanted more of the political plot strands. Maybe it just speaks to where my head has been of late. But I really wanted more of the machinations of kind of, well, without giving away spoilers, like animals versus humans in this world and how that kind of division came to be.
And also Elpheba's like personal convictions and principled
Yeah.
status, even though there's big consequences for her actions.
Yeah, you see more the consequences than the basis for that. And so I could have used more build up.
Yeah.
I was talking casually to a friend who had read the books, and they said that the book in tone was significantly darker, which, shocker for a musical, but that there was a lot more of the politics in the book. And they thought they actually took a lot of that from the book that wasn't in the stage musical to kind of flesh it out. Because again, listeners, we actually haven't mentioned yet, but this is only part one of a two-movie deal here. So it's actually only the first act of the musical Wicked that is in this movie, which just makes the 2 hour and 40-minute runtime like, what? Like, how long is your average Broadway musical? Let's say 3 hours. So they took the first half, which is generally the longer half, but made it into a 2 hour and 40-minute movie, which you could see raising some eyebrows about. But if that means they're going to bring in more of these political strands, for me, I found that satisfying. All right, should we get into the weeds a little bit?
Sure.
Let's talk characters. Were there any characters or actors that you particularly loved or hated?
Bowen Yang was in it, and I thought he was underutilized. I could have watched more Bowen Yang. Jeff Goldblum was amazing. And then, I mean, the leads are incredible.
Yeah, you can't throw a stone these days without hitting Cynthia Erivo or especially maybe Ariana Grande. The press tour for Wicked has been intense and long running, so I kind of feel like I've seen both of them everywhere lately.
I know it started with the Olympics, which was so long ago. Did you watch Ariana Grande's Saturday Night Live performance?
I did not.
It was really good.
Did she host or was she musical guest? Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, there's also a recent New York Magazine, maybe it's just like part of a Intelligencer article, but it's about how she is still performing as Glinda on her press tour, and it's like she's totally Daniel Day-Lewising it. And is she ever gonna go back to being Ariana Grande?
I read that too. I read that too. She needs to disappear into another role in a similar way that like Austin Butler pivoted from his like long running Elvis to oh gosh, I'm not going to remember the character's name in the Dune movie, but that was a similar one where he was doing just such a specific voice that it was like, oh, okay, maybe this will finally break him of the Elvis habit. But obviously Wicked is all she has on her mind right now because it has been a big part of her life. And I think she did a great job as Glinda. I think she was definitely channeling some vocal mannerisms of Kristen Chenoweth, who was the original Glinda on Broadway. In some of her line deliveries, it almost felt like I was listening to the original Broadway cast recording. Not in the songs that they were singing, but in like the line deliveries that you would hear, like kind of buffering the before and after of a song.
Sure.
So that was interesting, and maybe under different circumstances it would have bothered me, but I kind of chose to think of it as more of a sweet homage.
Yeah.
Did you find at all that Goldblum as a persona was a little too winking to be threatening? Because Oz as a character in this story, I think it's safe to say he's fairly threatening.
I guess having not read the book or anything, I thought he seemed a lot more smooth than the Oz from the original movie, who's kind of doddering and incompetent.
That's true. Interesting.
That was my take. And so, yeah, I was surprised when he turns out to be pretty dastardly.
I guess I could just never fully buy a dastardly turn because I feel like he's always kind of laughing at it. But that's just my own Goldblum baggage, I suppose.
Goldblum baggage.
Did you have any thoughts on the writing?
Not specifically, other than what would you cut? But have they filmed, like, did they film both movies at the same time, or do they have to go back and make part two?
I'm
Or do
kind
they
of
just have
shocked
to
that I don't
edit
know
it?
the answer to this. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really feel qualified for this question, having not read the book or seen the stage play. I don't. To me, it worked, the script, but I don't have any criticisms because I don't have the background, I guess.
Okay, I will say just a small spoiler warning. So, like, listeners, if you really don't want to be spoiled on the plot, maybe skip forward by 1 minute. But I had at least two thoughts on the writing and the way that they kind of extended the content to make it fit a long movie from like a half of a Broadway musical. So they did do some extra development of the relationship between Elpheba and Fiyero, which I was glad of because in the musical on stage, it feels very abrupt. And maybe even in the movie, there still wasn't enough of it, but there was substantially more development of that connection between those two characters than there was on stage. So I was glad to see that. And I was also super glad to see the scene of the animal professors like discussing their role at the school and like what was happening and giving that table setting, because that's another thing that you don't get in the stage musical. And so I appreciated that a lot in terms of things that were added, probably pulled from the book. Although my friend did say something fairly cryptic. She's like, Fiyero goes on a journey in the book that they could never replicate in a family-friendly movie.
Oh,
Yeah, so
intriguing.
very, very. Maybe someday when I have time, ha 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 ha, I will read the book. All right, so let's move on from specifics to the writing and the plot to the music and the choreography. This soundtrack is beloved. As you mentioned, Deborah, theater geeks have been singing this music for 20 years now. What were your thoughts on the music and choreography for the movie?
Well, I was blown away by the voice talent of the cast. They were amazing. I just love a big Hollywood scene of choreography. Like, there's the delightful scene that takes place in the library with like the love interest. That was very fun. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, as always, my constant nitpick with professionally produced musicals is that I want the choreography to be filmed more straight on so I can actually see it because I love a group dance. So that would be a small nit that I would pick in the big dance sequences if there were too many cutaways to close-ups or like cutaways to fun stunts that they were doing, which I'm not saying the stunts weren't fun. I mean, give me some bookshelves in the round. That seems so great. But I like to see the mechanics of it more than I did. But I'm willing to admit, maybe just a me thing again. Have you read any of these articles complaining about people wanting to sing in the theaters and how the theater chains themselves have had to listen, no singing. No singing. We're going to eventually air like a sing-along performance when you can come and sing. So they've explicitly had to say, please don't do that. But then you have moviegoers who are up in arms saying like, look, I've been waiting for however many years of my life for this movie. You can't deprive me of this joy of singing.
Yeah, it's not appropriate to sing
Agreed.
unless you are at an explicitly advertised sing-along performance.
Totally agree. Would they sit down at a Broadway musical and sing along? I don't think so.
No, but people sing at concerts,
That's true.
and that is a blurring of the lines of what is appropriate, I think.
Is this just another example of how like our cultural etiquette has just eroded to such an impossible degree that we'll never claw back any sort of decorum in public spaces again?
I think so. So my parents took my niece and nephew, I think, to see Annie and at this children's theater in Minneapolis, and they were talking about how there was like one person singing, and it was like an adult person with Down syndrome who was there with their parents who looked pretty elderly. And my dad was like, at first it was really annoying because I'm like, who's singing? You shouldn't be singing in a theater. But then he was like, when I saw it was this person who just has like different boundaries, he was charmed by it actually.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the only time when it's ever been appropriate to sing because it's too distracting in a theater or a play.
Obviously, yes, you have to understand the context, and there are situations in which you can be sympathetic to that. But like your average 30-year-old Wicked fan going in just because they want to do their best Idina Menzel impression is not going to cut it with me. That's not a good enough reason.
Yeah, you can play that soundtrack at home and sing along all you want.
Yep, that's what your shower and your car are for. What about the structure?
I am excited to see the second part of this movie. I thought it ended on an appropriate cliffhanging ending that also felt dramatically satisfying.
I understand that you can't end the first Wicked movie not on Defying Gravity because that is like the iconic song. But at the same time, you know as well as I do that in every Broadway musical, the second act is far less satisfying. That's not where they put the good songs. It's shorter. It's just you're not as excited. You maybe didn't get up during intermission to pee and now you regret it. It's never where the good stuff is. So I will be curious to see how they wrap the story up in a satisfying way. And it was just such an interesting choice to still make it so long. Let's talk about the look of the movie. From what I've read, they really prided themselves on using a lot of practical effects. Did you think that came across a lot on the screen?
I don't know what that means.
Like less CGI.
Oh, well, I guess I didn't really notice. I was so focused on Glinda's costumes. So fun. That was one of my favorite parts. Everything's just so fantastical. And I mean, all of the dresses were amazing. And then the other thing that stands out is Elpheba's complexion. And it was so good. Like in close-ups, you can see like in between her hair and her scalp, it's like the scalp is green, which is an attention to detail that you expect from a huge budget Hollywood movie. But all I could think about at times in the movie was like how hard it must have been to play that character and to be in, like, how much time did she spend in hair and makeup?
Right.
Getting greened before every shoot. That sounds horrible.
Yeah, that must have been really intense.
But worth it for us, the viewers, because it was impeccable.
So a glaring thing about the original Wizard of Oz that we haven't touched on yet is the presence of the Munchkins, right? So in the original movie, the Munchkins are played by little people, as the word munchkin might make you think. But in this movie, munchkins are maybe a touch shorter than everyone else, but not really, generally regularly sized, and seem to be just defined by like unruly hair and a fondness for like red and orange colored sweaters. What did you think of that choice?
It was at first a little bit jarring, and then I realized like this is probably something that like right-wingers would complain that the woke police have ruined. So I loved it because I am a member of the woke brigade, I guess. I think it's good. I think the original was, I mean, there's been stuff that the little people were treated really poorly, correct?
I think in terms of like the woke police angle, it's an easy thing to explain away, right? Because even if you don't want to make arguments about how it's discriminatory, you can say, well, it's based on a Broadway musical and it just wasn't practical to cast like multiple touring casts of a giant Broadway musical only with little people. There just would not be enough. So you can make a practical argument, I think, to head that one off.
Also true. Well, what do you think is... Oh, go ahead.
I just have one more comment on the look of the movie, and it really worried me at the beginning. So the opening scene gives you a little narration about what has happened at the end of the events of the original Wizard of Oz, right? Which, as we all know, I don't think it's a spoiler. Dorothy throws a bucket of water at the Wicked Witch and she melts. Mm-hmm. So you see like this puddle of water on the floor, and then you like kind of crash out of the Wicked Witch's castle and you follow some flying monkeys as they like soar over Oz towards the setting of where the majority of our story is going to be. But that is where it was some extremely muddy and bad looking CGI as the monkeys were flying over this kind of desolate landscape. And I was like, uh-oh, is this going to be what the whole movie is like? Because it was startlingly muddy looking and bad. But then they turned it around. I think maybe they started using more practical stuff and it looked a lot better. And I was so relieved because to have that be really the first images was frightening.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, maybe that was setting our expectations low.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that was a tactic. Okay, I'll take it. I would rather have it be that way for sure.
So how is this good for kids?
So we talked about the plot element of the misfit finding and accepting her own unique special powers. And I think that's a resonant story for kids. What did you think?
I thought it was good. So we went with, my oldest is 15. He was not into it. He was mad that he had to go. My mom was like, you're going just so you can make fun of it later. Think of it that way. So that worked out fine for him. My littlest niece is 4, and she hung in there.
Nice.
I think it's kind of too long and too complex of a movie for that age, but she rose to the occasion. So I thought it was okay. Like it's a little bit scary. The flying monkeys are scary in the original Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's great for kids. I liked the music. I liked the story, the acting, everything about it.
Yeah, I think too. I mean, I took Kenny and it was a little long and drawn out again because he doesn't care about things like the romance or like the squabbling between the popular kids and the not popular kids at the school is just not a thing that he's interested in yet or that resonates with him at all. But I was impressed that he did hang through for a 2-hour and 40-minute movie, which is definitely the first time he's ever done that. So do you take your kids to see stage musicals? Have you?
Yes.
And they are good in that situation.
Yes, totally.
So Tony is not like an across the board, I just don't like musicals kind of person.
Oh no, we're a musical loving family.
Okay.
He got Book of Mormon tickets for his birthday this year.
Oh, that's sweet. Did you at any point have a thought, again, this might be a me thing, that you would have preferred a filmed version of the stage musical as opposed to the conversion into a real looking story? So more like the filmed version of, say, Hamilton on Disney Plus.
Ooh, I would definitely watch that, but that did not occur to me.
Very different vibe, but it definitely translates the experience of seeing a musical on screen more directly.
Yeah, in fact, I think you know how you can watch either the stage version or the film version of Newsies on Disney Plus? I think my kids like the stage version better.
Same. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about at a certain age, like seeing that it is people doing it and seeing the mechanics of putting on a show that I think is really appealing.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there anything in this that makes it inappropriate or bad for kids that we haven't discussed already?
I guess my other question would be, do you think it relies over much on familiarity with the Wizard of Oz? And that's something that today's kids might not have in the way that we had?
That's a really good point. I think you should definitely make the original a prerequisite for watching Wicked. I don't know why you would go see Wicked without ever having seen or screened the original Wizard of Oz.
But then again, like I said, Kenny does not remember it, and he was fine.
Yeah, that's true.
You're not going to get the little jokes and asides about what comes later, but I guess what was proved is that you don't necessarily need that. Although to us, it makes the experience richer.
Right.
Are you ready to move on to our evergreen questions?
Yes.
Tell me what movie or TV show for grown-ups you were able to compare Wicked to.
Gone Girl.
Oh, tell me more.
Because it's a movie that is about you think you have an impression of the main character, you think she's a bad person, and then you realize what's behind her actions. Similar to the way that Elpheba is perceived as a wicked witch, but she's really trying to do good.
I like that.
How about you?
All right, so I have two, and one is not maybe really a grown-up movie, but definitely featured a lot in my teen years. So a movie about friends becoming enemies is Swing Kids. Did you ever see that in the 90s?
I did not.
It is an absurd premise. So, like, two best friends in Nazi Germany who love swing dancing because, again, this was probably the mid 90s. And one of them becomes, a believer in the Hitler Youth, and the other, like, continues to want to express his dissidence through dance. And then the other, just along the theme of misfits finding their place, a favorite of mine is Amelie, which I have not watched or thought of in a long time, but kind of has that same bright sense of whimsy.
Right. That's a good one.
Were you able to cast the gritty HBO reboot?
I would like to have a sketch comedy version of Wicked with Amy Schumer as Glinda.
I like
Wouldn't that be good?
Yeah.
Leslie Jones as Elphaba.
Uh-huh.
John Cho as Wizard of Oz. I'd make Fred Armisen the little sister. And I'd find a spot for Mindy Kaling somewhere.
Okay.
How about you?
I like that a lot. I punted on the casting, but I did say, in terms of HBO making everything more gritty and more complicated in the form of a long series, I want the prequel before the prequel about the downfall of the magical side of Ozian society. And I'm curious to know, because there are so many books that Baum wrote, if any of this is addressed in his book. So I want a series about the wizard's arrival, but not that terrible James Franco movie that they made. I want it to be about how he, a nobody from Omaha, reshaped Oz to worship him. Because there are so many moments in the film where you see like gears and just like the analog mechanics of so much of how Ozian society operates. And if you take a minute to think to yourself, wait a minute, this is a society that if it's not now, at least once it was based on magic. And yet we're seeing all these like little intricate clockwork devices that run everything. Like, how did that switch take place and why? I would like a limited series about that, please, HBO.
Good point.
Do you think it was better when we were kids?
Oh, where we watched Wizard of Oz 25 times in our youth because that was all there was. I guess probably not. It's probably better now.
Our youth, as we've said before, was kind of a fallow period for movie musicals. We weren't getting a lot of them, and the ones we were getting were maybe not the cream of the crop. So the movie musicals we watched and grew up with were already old. So it's nice to have reliably good movie musicals being made on a fairly regular basis now. I think that is an improvement. Would you ever watch this alone voluntarily?
I probably would. Yeah. How about you?
I would happily revisit. This is actually a favorite story of Kevin's, so he will undoubtedly suggest we sit down and watch it together during not kid time, and I will happily watch it with him.
Ratings?
I give it 4 stars, I think. Like I said, like not the best movie musical I can think of that I love the most, but I liked it a lot. 4 stars. How about you?
Yeah, also 4. I think we've already answered this, but see it or skip it?
See it for sure. You got to see the big splashy holiday movie, right?
Right. It's kind of the film event of the last half of this year. Thank you for listening to our review of Wicked. Next time, we'll be back with a conversation about screen time in the news. If you enjoyed our show today, please recommend it to one friend you think would enjoy it too, so that we can grow our community of parents for sanity and screen time. If you don't want to miss our up-to-the-minute thoughts about screen time, you can head over to our website, My Screen Time Too, and subscribe for updates. Tune in next time for more real talk about the movies and TV we watch with our kids because we have to and sometimes because we like to. Bye.
Bye.
Screen time. Screen